an awesome Ardbeg lineup for you, as you probably already know, because you're here, you bought the tasting kit. Thank you for doing it. One of these ones is really, actually two of them are really fun because technically they've not been released in Alberta yet, and we'll get to why that is. We'll see bits and pieces of them down the line, as it were. While we're waiting for stragglers, as always, we like to do a quick recap of some other tastings and events that are coming up in the not too distant future. And I have to scroll down a bit because a lot of them are sold out, which is amazing. But the next virtual one coming up that there's still tickets for is the Scotch Malt Whisky Society 40th anniversary tasting, where we are tackling a lineup. Is this going to let me share? Come on, share. There we go. A lineup of the cleverly named 1983 range, called 1983 because that's obviously the year the society got started. And that range is bottles from distilleries 1, 9, 8, and 3. Pretty cool lineup. We've got a few other bottles that we've added into that to flesh it out, including a pretty cool older Ardmore, one of the oldest Ardmores I think we've seen as well. And then what else is coming up? Just scroll down. That is now sold out. The March SMWS tastings are open, including for registration, including the virtual and the in-store sessions. For the ladies, we have our Ladies Only Whiskey Festival, the Lassies Only Fest, in support of a local women's shelter, as we do every year. An opportunity for the ladies to try some drams and not get mansplained. Curt, is that kind of one of our marketing angles for that one? I think we were gonna have a riff on that last year. We just getting around to it about women's splaining, where we were gonna promote the tasting by having women talk down at men about stuff. But we should do that. I think it would be funny.
Tread carefully. That's all I'm going to say.
Curt's looking less certain than I am about it. In store, we've got James Willis from Kilhoman Distillery on Isla coming mid-month next month. There's our annual Irish whiskey tasting, which, Curt, I'm assuming, is that you? It might be Curt, it might be Harmony. I don't know.
I think Harmony's kind of taken those over. I haven't done one in a couple of years now.
Bizarrely, and this is a bit surprising, there's still a couple of spots left for the Whiskeyland tasting, which has got a pretty baller lineup. There's a Springbank in that lineup, if I remember correctly, and a 20-year-old Bowmore. Some cool bottles in that. Anyway, lots of other things coming in the pipeline. You guys know where to find this stuff. The really new ones are the Single Cask Nation tasting to launch our new Kalila cask finished in rum, which is pretty gorgeous. And then these two beauties, which I believe are stuck at customs for some reason and have been for a week or two. We have a 2002 Ben Romick and a 2002 Kalila, which is really cool. That's one of the oldest Isla casks we've ever had for the store that was not a Bowmore. Does that seem like correct facts there, Curt? Probably something like that. Anyway.
27-year-old Port Ellen at one point.
I was 25. It was 25. So there, it's close. Close to the same age. Anyway, lots of fun tastings coming up in the not too distant future. So, Kensington Wine Market, fun fact, some of you know this, others might not. We were the first Ardbeg embassy in North America back in the day, which is quite an honor. Curt and I have been doing Ardbeg tastings for quite some time. We had a famous soccer match where I captained the gold and I believe you captained the green, and the gold won. I was in net. I had one like incredible penalty kick save, which I think really was the difference between winning and losing that day. But
you took us by one, but I did
too much. It was a great match. For some reason, I think we were never able to bring that back because of the AGLC. I don't know why. But anyway, it was a fun soccer game. Anyway, because we're one of the embassies, we do get some limited releases every once in a while. And unfortunately, some of the limited releases that were coming in the pipeline ended up in a container that wasn't refrigerated. And then there was a strike and then it got cold. And long story short, it had to go back. It was not in sellable condition. So we got a limited amount of 2 whiskeys that are in this lineup tonight. And rather than create a shitstorm of FOMO, we just decided we would put them into a tasting. And then when we could eventually get around to offering bottles to people, we will. And where that's really starting off with tonight, which is really exciting, is the Ardbeg 17. Because, Curt, I know you and I were both into whiskey back when you could get the 17, maybe the tail end of when you could get the original 17. And those became kind of legendary bottles in no small part because the whiskey, I think, in those ones in the 2000s probably had a fair bit of liquid that was more than 17 years of age in them. But they were pretty spectacular whiskeys.
They were, and it was one of the very few whiskeys that succeeded in spite of itself, if you will. 40% at a very, very tame kind of level for Ardbeg, and it was absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
I like
And
that they've given us an homage to that. Like they haven't tried taking it up here with this one. They've left it at 40. It's kind of cheeky. I like it.
it is, and especially given that Ardbeg, if you think about it, has been one of the distilleries leading the charge of non-chill filtered, no added coloring, of the bigger guys for much of their range. To take that back at 17, I think was probably a bit of a risk, but it has been fairly well received. And I know you've tried it, Curt. I've tried it. Uh, it's pretty lovely stuff. If we were overly generous, one might have dug out of their collection an old 17 to put into the lineup. And you never know, that might happen at some point in the future. But yeah, we've both been pretty impressed with the new 17. We're generally fans of things that are higher proof. But this one worked really well.
Does Ardbeg ever miss with their graphics? Man, that was a cool image.
I don't think they do. I think it's fair to say they don't.
Yeah, there's a team there with a little bit of a fashion sense from what I understand.
Mhm. Yeah,
The guys don't take themselves too seriously either. Hey everyone, a lot of familiar faces. I'm Cam with Ardbeg, Moa Hennessy, on the call as well. So feel free if you have any questions for myself or some deep dive stuff. I'm here to answer anything. But yeah, really looking forward to 17. Andrew, just a quick little update too. The frozen container, quote unquote, was now approved to be sent back. So it actually, the Ardbeg was not affected.
that's
So
good.
we are going to be seeing some 17 very quick here. And I'll let you, I don't want to say too much either, but I'll let you guys deal with it on there. But the 17-year-old, definitely an ode to, the Ardbeg has a bit of a storied past too. I mean, it's shut down twice in the pretty much all of the 80s. It was pretty much closed down. Reopened again in 1996, and they thought they was going to shut down for good until the Glenmorangie Company took it over in 1997. And this was the 17 was kind of the first really like interesting limited release that they did in there, like you mentioned, Andrew, about the 2000s. So it's a cool ode to the fact that it is 40% chill filtered, which they're all completely against and gone against the grain. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. And
Well, Cam, before you mute yourself again, do you know, is the plan to keep this 40% moving forward, or was this kind of a one-off to just sort of reintroduce it to everyone?
I think it was a one-off. Again, I haven't heard anything down the pipeline, so they will be releasing the 17 probably similar to what they've been doing with the 19 with the Traigh Bhan. So we'll see with that, but I think they're going to stick with the 40% at the moment, and it's very against the grain for Ardbeg, but still, on the palate, it's very much Ardbeg as well.
And you got to love that on the box there in the corner, you got that shorty with a cape. I don't know if you guys can see that little detail just above committee exclusive. It's the little things. It's the little marketing details that are lovely. So Curt, very like light, fresh. I mean, I think one of the things people loved about those Ardbeg 17s is that they were a little bit on that spirit driven side because they were a bit older, mostly kind of ex-bourbon, refill casks. So, true to that style, look at this fairly pale color, which, for us, I know for maybe your average whiskey consumer, that doesn't get exciting. You want to see something dark. But for us, we know, especially with a bit of age behind it, that means we're going to get more spirit character. We have that potential to get some really nice exotic fruit notes coming from it too.
Yeah, this is all like soft melons, like honeydew melon, a little bit of lime juice, lime Jolly Rancher, bit
Yeah,
of
the
orange, Ardbeg citrus. Pretty
Jolly Ranchers and like Starburst fruit candies is a good call. The peat on this is really like, at least on the nose, is quite mellow. It's soft, it's dry. It kind of reminds me of like when you get a chance to smell the Ardbeg malt, like before it's been actually milled down. It's quite malty and gristy on the nose as well.
bit of pineapple for me too.
Mm-hmm.
So for years, I think Andrew, you and I have been kind of banging this drum, and I think a few other people I know around the store. So anybody in the room is one of them. With the Ardbeg releases, everything's like quirky, something different, a different cask type, ever. A few of us have been banging at the gate saying, just give us a relaunch of the 17 or give us 10-year-old cask strength. That's all we want. So they've killed it with this one, as far as I'm concerned. I hope this stays around forever. This style is absolutely my jam. This is kind of like old school Ardbeg used to be. It's got a lot more fruit than that black licorice thing that's going on with a lot of the younger Ardbegs lately. This is a killer gram. So putting it out there, if anybody's listening, 10-year-old cask strength is a regular release, or at least a committee one-off.
Well, and I think, Curt, fair to say, like, just naked, we want, much like the 10, because the 10 is pretty naked too, like ex-bourbon, not much else there. We just want to see stuff like that, but older. And I mean, we appreciate like a lot of the releases are especially the ones that are really out there are quite good. Like I know with Galileo was one that I struggled with when it was released, but I know in recent years I've tried it again, and like I really like that release now. Like I didn't really love it before, and I think that one was it Marsala or Madeira? I think it was Marsala casks. It was like an unusual one. Yeah, but I think for a lot of us, the purists, like we want to see the distillate, and when you bring those other flavors in, I think from Ardbeg's perspective, you make it accessible to a broader group of people by doing that, because you're taming the smoke a little bit and you're adding in some other flavors. But I think the old school whiskey drinkers, we want like that kind of classic profile.
Agreed.
There have been so many limited releases too over the years. Like Andrew, like last year, we had more than ever before. This year is kind of tamed down quite a bit. There is a limited release coming up that I can't speak of, but it's made by the committee members. So they actually a secret meeting about a few years ago. They all met with Dr. Bill and Jillian, the whiskey creation team, to create an Ardbeg for Ardbeg. For Ardbeg committee members for that. So the release coming up here, probably won't see it until September, October of this year, but I guaranteed you guys are really going to love it, because it's a kind of an ode to the past, a little bit of that too, and yeah, can't say too much though.
Now, Cam, you can't say too much, but those of us who know that a lot of this stuff gets leaked early because Americans have their freedom, and their freedom allows them to actually request information that has to be submitted. So I think some of us have already seen this. Yeah, I don't know that we need to spill the beans, but there's information out there, I suppose, is all I'm going to say about that. Curt?
The thing about the 17 too, sorry, just Andrew, you
go ahead,
can mention a little bit of that unpeated. They actually use unpeated stock too for the 17 for this one too. So peated and unpeated as well. So that's kind of that fun little dynamic too.
One was that partly because they were doing that, back when they released the original 17, or was that in an effort to kind of make sure the style was closer to, profile wise, the style of the old 17?
For sure. The original 17, they used unpeated stock too. So I think it was kind of an ode to that. I don't know the exact percentage, but they did want to kind of include it and make sure that it was very similar in style to the original 17.
Yeah. That's cool. That is a fact I did not know. So there you go. Cam, you've already more than proven your worth for being a part of this tasting tonight. So
I'm happy to be here.
All right. Should we move on to Traigh Bhan batch 6? Now this one we do have on our website, so I'll pull up the site here for us. Now, Cam, this is one thing you can clarify for us too. Is this the second last release of Traigh Bhan? Did you tell me something about that in the not too distant past?
Again, I can't see too much on it, but I would recommend picking up some bottles of batch 6 and batch 7 that's going to be released this year too. So,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
all.
I mean, I've been holding back. Like I've got at the store at least one bottle of each release because I had it in mind that at some point I'd want to do a release, like a 7 whiskey release of the Traigh Bhans, just to do them as a vertical. But
And I know we're talking about possibly doing a fun dinner too. It'd be great.
we have been talking.
Traigh Bhan 19 dinner.
Yeah, there are some fun bottles tucked away for that occasion. So batch 6 here, one, it even says this in our description, rumored to be the second last, matured in ex-bourbon and sherry cask before balling 46.2%. Limited annual release. Curt, I think it's fair to say that we've probably been more excited about these in recent years than the committee releases, but partly because we've been waiting for so long for Ardbeg's age statements to get caught up with production getting turned back on in the late 90s. And we're finally at that point where there's a reasonable amount of older stuff in the warehouses.
Yeah, I think you're saying exactly the way I feel. The young stuff is never going to not be on my shelf. Like, I love it. The 10 should be on everybody's shelf. Ugadal is better now than it's been in years. Used to be Corey was my favorite of the core, but Ugadal right now is flipping it even. Quality is lights out awesome. But the dimension now that we've got in the range, starting to see 17, 19, 23, 25s, it's cool because it's a spirit that works at all ages. I'll tell you in just a sec here something about that, but where it really, really shines is a lot of it just turns into something stunning.
So
I was talking, I think I told you, Andrew, I was talking to Jacob once from Shelter Point when they were trying to dial in their spirit run. He said they got a chance to go to Ardbeg, visit the distillery and everything, and tried the new make there. Jacob said it's not even fair. It's like they have a cheat code. Like what's coming off the stills at Ardbeg is just so good that no matter what you do with it, it's not going to make a whiskey that isn't. Now, whether every expression is our favorite, that's a different story, but they're making damn good whiskey. And
do you think that's why did Ardbeg take pity on them then and give them some Ardbeg casks? Don't you remember when Shelter Point had some Ardbeg casks to put their whiskey in?
Yep.
I was going to say that the fun flavor kind of unique that I get between both the 17 and the 19 are like Flintstone vitamins. I'm getting Flintstone vitamins between both. And it's interesting with what Cam told us. I mean, even though the ABVs are a little different, the 17 being made at least partly with, I don't know if we should call it Blasda or just unpeated Ardbeg. But the 19 definitely has a bit more like peat to it. It's a bit earthier, a bit smokier than the 17. And I guess that makes sense. It's not just an ABV difference, it's an actual makeup in the spirit profile.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was last on Isla, this was 2 years ago, and my first time at Ardbeg, and we show up, you're expecting that peat to kind of resonate through the whole thing. It turns out they weren't doing the peat, they weren't distilling peat, it was unpeated. So it might have been part of the 17, maybe not the 17, but like it was a different experience because they didn't really get to smell all that beautiful peat that you typically do. So they had a project that they were working on with the unpeated stuff, which is interesting.
Sorry, I'm just replying to Jeff's comment about them getting the casks from an American supplier, and it's fake news because it's not as good a story. Curt, any thoughts for you on this 19? Like, it's juicy, it's really fruity. The sherry's an interesting component because it's not that powerful. Like the sherry's a pretty light touch in this.
Yeah, and I think that's why I've liked these all, because you get to see the spirit, like you said earlier. I think it's rad that we've got the 19 sitting on the shelves now to be able to sell. I don't know what's left after the sale weekend, if any, but the fact that we can actually put it on the shelves and sell it and not have to ballot it.
Well, Curt, it wasn't on sale, so I don't. Well, I mean, people might have bought it, but it wasn't on sale. But anyway, that's a different
So
story.
this one's pretty, Andrew, but I think it's honestly one of the weakest ones, and it's still that good. I think some of the earlier ones, batch 2 was, I think, maybe my favorite, 2 and then 1 and then 3 maybe. But this is still lights out, better than most of what's on the market at this age.
Yeah. And the peat's fairly prominent in there too. I mean, yeah, it's mellowed a fair bit from what you get from a younger expression. I suppose perhaps the flaw in our tasting makeup tonight, Curt, is we probably should have started with 10-year-old just so that we had a good baseline. And instead we started with 17 and 19. But I mean, it makes sense from a progression taste-wise because we're starting with the lightest, we're building into progressively bigger and richer whiskeys as we go. But you know, the 19 is noticeably more peated than the 17. But I think if we'd had 10 beside it, you'd be able to see how much it's actually mellowed over the last almost 20 years that it was in cask.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think the closest you're going to get in this lineup that would be Heavy Vapours, but it's not going to have sharpness that 10.
Yeah. Cool.
No,
All
this is
right.
the cool.
Now on to something completely different. We have Y2K, which is a release that we might see some of, you know, possibly, maybe, don't want to make any promises, but we got a bottle of this, and we felt the best thing to do with it would be to put it into the lineup. Obviously laid down in 2000, like the turn of the millennium. You all might remember Y2K. The packaging on this is pretty cool. The box looks like, I don't know, something from out of the Matrix. But the whiskey, Curt, what do we know about this whiskey? It's 2000 vintage, like matured in Oloroso and bourbon cask, 23 years of age, 46%. Or maybe
Asking me, but I'm gonna toss the grenade a little further down the line. So I can answer your question, but when I answer these things, I am slightly cynical of the marketing, though I generally do love the stories. So I'll pass the torch here to Cam,
okay.
unless he wants me to take it.
Yeah, I mean, 23-year-olds. This is an ode to when Ardbeg, before they shut down, or right after when the Glenmorangie company took it over, in the 2000s, they rebuilt the distillery house. You know, put in some new pot stills. It really was kind of marked, you know, a prosperous, you know, time for Ardbeg around that. And as mentioned, Orloso sherry casks, 23. It's the rarity of this too. I mean, we don't get a lot we get none for market actually. So Andrew, you might be getting some possibly as well. So it's pretty rare that we get to try this tonight as well.
But I think, I mean, well, Cam, for us especially, because of that, knowing that, like, you know, not everybody who maybe even wants this has a chance to buy it. I think that's partly why we like to put these things into tastings, because, I mean, that's what this stuff is made for. It's made to be drank. It's made to be shared with friends, and it's cool to do this. And I have fond memories of the 20-something Ardbegs from, when was that? It seems like a long time ago, but I think it was only 4 or 5 years ago. We were getting these 21, 22, 23-year-old releases. And yeah, it's a pleasure to get it. So Jeff is bragging. He's saying BC has it. So I think BC's container was a different container than
It
our
was a different container. Yeah, we will be seeing some more of it. Not a ton, but there will be some coming into the market.
Mhm. Curt, thoughts on the nose and palate?
Yeah, it's just exciting, and it kind of has me a little bit gobsmacked that we're getting whiskeys that taste like old Ardbeg.
Mhm.
You used to be able to go to the whiskey bars on Isla and hit up drams of like 17 and stuff. You probably remember, Andrew, they'd had you duotang in coffees or whatever. And you could buy whiskeys that tasted like this for, you know, just a handful of pounds, nothing crazy. I didn't think we'd see stuff like this on the market as fairly as we're seeing it, despite having been to the warehouses many times and seen a backload of casks labeled 2000, right around that era anyways. I kind of thought they would be a little more sparing as to trickling it out, but we're getting a lot of this kind of stuff. I love it. I like that it's just slightly more, like somebody said earlier, it's like a better 17. I'll just say it's a slightly louder 17. The fruits are turned up a little bit more pineapple for me and stuff.
Mhm.
I don't get a crazy bigger chunk of sherry on it, a little bit, and it's really tastefully done
Mhm.
and
I
more
mean,
tangy.
you can definitely tell there's more sherry than there was on the Traigh Bhan. Um, it's not quite as fruity, like it's not leaping out of the glass the same way, but the palate on this is lovely. It's rich, it's dark. As you said, Curt, this tastes like those older releases of Ardbeg that you could try back in the day when things were possible.
Yeah, for me, I get a hint of like lemon zest as well. Bit of like candy walnuts, so like not like super sweet. It's not crazy prominent, but still that classic structure is there.
Mhm.
More concentrated. That was a good, yeah, for sure.
And a fair bit of malt, like it's very malty too. I mean, there's not a lot of single malts where you're getting to 23 years of age and the barley has such a prominent role still in the structure of the whiskey. Um, yeah, and I think that's one of the things I've always loved about Ardbeg is that malt profile is quite prominent, but not in a like an overbearing way, not in a way that's distracting you from the overall. It's just got this really nice, chewy, biscuity, warming kind of profile to it.
And like Cam says, lemon is like
Mhm.
omnipresent Ardbeg. It's one of the key components that I look for all the time. And I don't even like lemon, but it's always there. This to me is like candied lemon peel. Sorry, a little bit of orange, lots of pineapple, grilled pineapple. But the 17, I think those melon tones are slightly more appealing. I think it shines just a little more for me because it doesn't
Mhm.
great sherry. Love them both, but I think I would still take the 17.
Yeah. Um, so now like the back end of this lineup is in some ways going to be a walk down memory lane because um all of these, although there might be there might be an option in the not too distant future, all of these are technically sold out now, including Spectacular. I think we sold the last of our Spectacular over the course of the weekend. But Heavy Vapors takes us back a couple of years, takes us into some comic book territory, Curt. And we were talking about this one before we got going, and I'm gonna have to figure out where to pull it up because again, it is one that's been gone for a while and it's not on our site. But oh, here we go. Got it on the Ardbeg site. Who will restore the balance? So now all of this had to do with was the Ardbeg Spirit Purifier. For those of you who've been there, Ardbeg's one of it's either 2 or 3 distilleries that have a spirit purifier on them in Scotland. And essentially, as the spirit goes up the top of the still, down the line arm, there's like a little trap door that it can fall down through, back into the still, get redistilled. So even though Ardbeg is a heavier distillate and a heavily peated distillate, it's always got this lightness to this delicacy because of this reflux that's encouraged by essentially making those heaviest elements drop back down. Now, uh, that is not what happened with this one, Curt, is it?
No, they killed the purifier. I don't know how you do that, whether you can just kind of seal it off or how the technicalities work with it. Cam unmuted, so maybe he has some insight on that.
Yeah, or it just broke, and they figured, why don't we make a whiskey without the purifier and see what happens? So, yeah, I think there's a way that you can bypass it for sure. Whether it's mistake or not, it was a really interesting release. This is the first time in the history that they've done this to not use the purifier. So, as Andrew mentioned, like it really adds that classic oily characteristic, that beautiful mouthfeel. It's still quite pretty. And this is a little more of an untamed beast. So love it or hate it, but it's definitely unique for sure.
Yeah. Cam, I think what you meant to say, whether it was mistake or marketing,
Well,
or a little bit of both.
there was yeah. Do you remember the release of the washbacks as well? Similar situation.
Mhm.
Mutations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is cool as an experiment and as a concept, but it's very young. You can tell, like it's spirity. It's got those almondy tones you get in make a lot. It is. You can tell it's a heavier bag. It's not EQ'd to have all those high notes, those sharp citrus
Mhm.
tones, and everything. It's a little dumpier, and oily is a good way to put it.
Oh
But it's
man.
almost like an oil that's tamping down most of the.
It is so oily, viscous. The smoke on this is like quite raw, tarry. Some really nice notes of like fennel, a bit of clove. Kevin had a good question here, and I think he's right about it. I don't see it on the Ardbeg site, but that the cask makeup on this was a fairly neutral or more of a naked cask profile so that you could really see that difference shine through. So probably majority ex-American oak casks.
There's
Okay,
a
I'm
lot
just
of
keeping
mezcal.
going. And bottled at 50.2%. So this was the committee release. And I think, was this the last time we had an Ardbeg Day committee release? Was that the last year of that we had that?
Yeah, because Spectacular, we didn't get an Ardbeg or
Mhm.
committee release, unfortunately.
Still got art. We still got the Spectacular though. I really like it. I mean, in some ways, it's like partway between like Ardbeg and Supernova. Like it's almost allowing more of that smoke profile to come through in it. It's not quite as maybe not quite as smoky, but it's peatier than what I would typically expect to get from like a standard Ardbeg.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think this spirit with maybe 2 or 3 more years and in sherry. I think this actually would have worked well with sherry, kind of like some of those Craig Elkies and Mortlocks tend to get quite heavy and meaty. I think it's almost just a little too naked, a little too spirity. It drinks
Uh,
like it's a couple years off new make.
I don't, maybe it's the fact that I love mezcal, but like I think this to me is very mezcal-like, and I think that's why I like it. Like it's like that those volatile acids. But Curt, I've got an idea. We should funnel this to Jackie and Co. You could have like the Ardbeg Heavy Ugadale. So that could be a committee release where they just do this, but in sherry, and that could be Heavy Ugadale.
And it just tastes like the smells belching out of some old unmaintained tractor.
And I don't know if this is going too far down the rabbit hole, but the marketing could be built around. You remember, like in Scandinavia in World War II, how the Germans were trying to get heavy water? You know, the bombers coming in low, it drops a barrel. Think about it. It writes itself. It's probably a little too edgy, but
I'm taking notes. We'll send them directly.
Jackie will know it came from a good place. You know, it's funny. I don't know that I would normally like that kind of raw profile, but for this one, I really dig that style. But again, it really reminds me of mezcal, and I think that's why I like it.
Yeah, intellectually, I like it. I love
Bell peppery sort of.
Sorry, Cam?
I feel like it has a little more kind of like bell pepper pyrazines than other Ardbegs too, and it's a bit more vegetal. I found.
That's a good descriptor. Sorry, Curt, you were gonna say?
No, I like this one intellectually a lot more than I actually like the whiskey. It's a cool concept. I like that they did it. Um, it's fun to be able to try to see what they do get if they're not cleaning it up as much as they do. Nah,
Yeah.
nah.
I just went back for fun to the Ardbeg 17, and now it's making me think of ice cream, like an Ardbeg ice cream, which could also be fun. All right, Anamorphic, which is something that we had until not too long ago. Cam, since you're much more of a details guy than I am, and I'm busy trying to pull this up on the Ardbeg website, do you want to lead us into the Anamorphic
Yeah,
story?
yeah, for sure. It was a really unique. It really has to do with the casks themselves, and more specific, the charring of the casks. So essentially, it's a bit of an enigma for this is the first time that they've done this at Ardbeg too. So they remove the cask heads and score them very deeply on the sides, and then they heavily toast them in like an intense, like particular infrared process. And then they expose the cask to the flame aggressively, so it's charred the inside of the barrel before filling with Ardbeg and the spirit, and then that age. So really, what that does is talking about like coffee, bell pepper, vegetal. This is kind of that ramped up. So it really has to do with the two different types of cask, the char that they're doing. So like the sides are completely different than the actual barrel. So that's what makes it kind of a anamorphic or a Frankenstein, I guess is kind of what they want to call it.
And are we to take from the label that this was their way of saying that this is Ardbeg's attempt to play three-dimensional chess? I mean,
Pretty
it's
much.
pretty
Yeah,
much, yeah.
exactly.
Now the infrared cam, you're gonna have to like that part I don't get. Like I get the toasting and the charring. Much as I didn't get Costco in their pamphlet was suggesting that I could wear an infrared baseball cap and recover some of my forest that is thinning, which I suspect is probably not going to happen. But what does the infrared element do in all that?
It really concentrates the treatment of the oak. That's the only thing that they're doing. And so it's multiple treatments. So like they remove the cast, they do the infrared, and then they expose the cast to flames like as they would usually do, and that sort of finishing. So with that infrared, it just concentrates that kind of flavor into the side of the cask. Or
That's
so I'm
interesting.
told.
So Andrew, we
Or
had this open a couple times over the last couple of years, or year and a bit, anyways. I'm so grateful we did it tonight after Heavy Vapors because this is way better than I gave it. I'm really digging this.
I I really like the palate on it. I find the nose a bit closed, like it's harder to penetrate. And it's probably because they've, through this technique of essentially, finding ways to get the spirit to penetrate deeper into the wood, pull out like more character. I just find the nose is very like kind of caramel forward, lot of oak congeners and not as much spirit, but the spirit's still there in the palate. I like it, Curt. I think you and I are going to have to agree to disagree on this one because I think I like the Heavy Vapors better. I love that like really raw, amped up kind of spirit profile.
You're like the perfect one to drink with. Then don't have to share my bottle. You don't have to share yours. It's great. I actually prefer the nose on this one. I like the sour kind of woody funkiness that's going on there. It's quite fermenty.
It's like
Palate's
it's like a hippie chocolate factory to me. Like kind of there's a yogurty note to their chocolates, and I kind of dig it, but I don't think everyone would.
Yeah, to me, I get
like
a little like it's like chocolate, but chili chocolate, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
Like chili crisp with chocolate in it. And it's yeah, I think it's because that high mocha char is what they call it.
So Alec got a big load of banana on this one, sweeter, well, definitely sweeter than the last one. And again, I think that's because you've got a much more like, you know, fresh wood profile here. Like there's a lot more oak on this than there was on the last one. Like not even really close. But yeah.
yeah, with the way they're cooking, that they'll be re-caramelizing all those vanillins and stuff. You'll get a lot of flavors that you get in bourbon, for lack of a better way to put it, right? Um,
Mhm.
Great sweetness on that for me. It's not over the top sweet. It's not that wine kind of sweetness. Um, I'm pleasantly surprised with this. If it hadn't followed the Heavy Vapors, I don't know. It might be a different story. When I go back to Heavy Vapors now, all I can smell is agave syrup and a little bit of patchouli hiding.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, for me, I like it. I think again, but I mean, this is gonna come as a not gonna come as a surprise to anybody. I always like it when the oak is a bit more restrained. And I think for me, it's good. It's just it's not my favorite. I'd like to see a bit more spirit from it. And if I were a dragon, I'd say for that reason I'm out. But you know, uh anyway, Anthology release number 2. 14-year-old, the unicorn bottling, the Scotland's national animal bottling. I think we could call this as well too. Uh, I remember really liking this one. 14 years, predominantly in bourbon casks, and then I believe Cam, was there a little special finishing or an element that was
There
added to
is.
this
Yeah,
one?
they finish it in Madeira casks. So it's a
Wow.
Madeira and ex bourbon for this place, 14-year-old.
Yeah. And Curt, this is gone, right? This is.
Yeah. Um, I think the last of it just moved recently.
Mhm.
If only there was a guy on this call that could maybe try to hunt down.
Well,
I'm looking on Liquor Connect right now, so I got your back, guys.
okay. Well, the funny thing was like pre 4 to 5 years ago, like all these Ardbeg releases would come in, we'd sell out of them, and then I'd get an email and it'd be like, "Hey, Ontario didn't take their full allocation. Do you want another 20 cases?" I'd be like, "Yeah, I'll take 20 cases." you know, blah, blah, blah. Finland didn't take their allocation. Do you want some more? The good old days may come back. You never know. Things change, but yeah, love the packaging on this one. I like the nose on this one. It's a little deeper than the last. It has some of that decadence to it. There's definitely some spice coming from the Madeira.
Last one was very cask loud. The previous one was very spirit driven. This is
Mhm.
more Ardbegian. Like blindly, this one jumps out of the glass way more.
Yeah.
Right?
Lots of spice on the palate. Like, you know, Cam was mentioning chili flakes, but like chili flakes, cayenne, there's like a spicy heat to this that I don't think we've had in anything else so far tonight. Nice sweetness. The malt is still there. It's got some age on it too. I mean, I don't know that like I think it's cool that they're telling us how old this is, but I don't know that that's really an important factor in it. It tastes a little bit more mature than say the Anamorphic or the heavy vapors.
But we will always take an age state.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, with Ardbeg too, they don't get too caught up on the age statements, and that's, you know, for Corey Brecken and Ugadal, it's always just what the liquid is in there. So, you know, is
Mhm.
it nice to have 14 years? Absolutely. The previous Anthology was 13, if I'm not mistaken. The hard
Yeah.
was 10. And there should be another release of Anthology coming into this year for 2025. So we can look into that probably closer to November release, Andrew.
So can you tease us like, you know, we had a unicorn and a harpy, which is a little bit terrifying. Um, are you able to tease us with what sort of mythical creature we might encounter this time? Or is that a
Uh,
closely guarded secret?
it's not a regarded secret. I actually forgot. So I'll have to do
Oh,
a bit more research.
well, it won't be a Kelpie because they've done that one. So,
No, I'll have to take.
all right, no worries. Yeah, I quite like that. I think it's fair to say for me, I like that a little bit better than I did the anamorphic. But which is not to say I didn't dislike the anamorphic, but I really like that one. Curt, any final thoughts on it? It's a little cheesy too. It's
It
got
is a little bit.
a nice funk.
Um, I don't like it as much as the 13, but the 13 came out of nowhere. I did not expect to like that nearly as much as I did, and it was
Mhm.
whiskey. That was Sauterne, I think.
Yeah, it was a
Sir.
Sauterne. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That one was shockingly good, and I didn't buy one, and I kind of regret not buying one. So if you're hunting for Dusties, that's a cool one to watch for. This
Mhm.
one I like a little bit less, but I still like it, and now I kind of want to, you know, as we typically do with Kensington and stuff, be able to open the range at some point together. So I think I might have to go hunting.
Well, if you're following the chat, Curt, Michael has opened both. So maybe he'll invite you over for a dram of both. You can try them side by side.
Done
Uh,
deal. I know.
Spectacular. The last one before we go through and do the speed round. So this was the 2024 limited edition release. Obviously went with a bit of a circus theme. Matured in ex-bourbon and port wine casks. Now, Cam, I want to know they don't talk like it's not finished in port. So this is a marriage of bourbon matured Ardbeg with port matured Ardbeg. That be fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. So put her up on
And
screen.
I mean, it's typical. You'd see, you know, port finishes in a lot of different um, malts, but this is the first time that Ardbeg has done a port cast finish. So you would see that typically, and you know, obviously we have a core range from Glenmorangie. So something interesting, but not it's not typical to Ardbeg, but you know, we see it lots everywhere else.
So Cam, now hopefully this is taken as it's intended as a cheeky question, but do Bernard Arnault and Selma Hayek own a port winery, or is that where the cast come from for Glenmoe, or is it just they're acquiring them? Like, do you
They're
know?
just acquiring them, so we don't actually don't have any sort of we have a connection in Portugal. So obviously, I think it's with it might be with Taylor Flygate
Okay.
and it's Croft Fonseca. So that is, I believe, where we source out our ports from. But it's basically just
Yeah.
it's outsourced.
It's funny you say that because I want to say about 7 years ago, I was in Portugal visiting Taylor and Fonseca to buy, they were going to do a 25th anniversary port for us. They did it. And I asked them about that. I was like, do you sell people your casks? And they're like, no. And I think part of the disconnect is that a lot of these casks are not, they're not your vintage port casks. They're not the tawny port casks. They're the ruby port. It's that entry level one. So it's more of a cask seasoning process, much like sherry casks are seasoned today. But every port house I went to is like, do you sell your casks to anybody? And they're like, no, we use them until they fall apart because we don't want them to impart character on the spirit.
And basically, the unused casks or that they're not using, they go to a broker, and that's where we purchase the, as a lot of places do. It all goes to a broker. It's not an actual port house that we have direct ties to. It's just that's essentially what we have the monopoly on that wood.
The interesting thing about this is, I mean, I can get a little bit of it on the palate, but I mean, when you talk port finishing, almost all of them have this like pinkish hue to them. And this doesn't have that. And when you nose and taste it, it's got this chocolatey note that I often associate with export casks, but it's not like dominant. Like the port element in this is such a subtle, light touch. Curt, I can tell you want to chime in on this.
I'm so Ardbeg is really, really tasteful with their loud casks. If that makes sense. They use a lot of aggressive casks for their limited releases, whether it's Sala or it might be Sauterne, whatever. And they can be very heavy-handed in other people's hands, for lack of a better way to put it. This is really tastefully done port. It doesn't feel like port to me because that can be really deadening being a whiskey for me. This is quite cool. I really like this one. It's jammy, way jammier than I expected.
A mythical serpent. Interesting. Cam is saying for the third release of Anthology. Yeah, Curt, I mean, you and I think are on the same page in this. Anytime I see port cask, I get nervous because we've seen so many of them done so poorly. I think it's fair to say like the how long Glenmorangie's been doing their Kinta Reuben, it's obviously working, so they've managed to figure it out. But I think part of the issue is that a lot of times poorly done port casts, you get this really musty, unpleasant, earthy notes from it. And then if the cask is spoiled, you get these like weird acidic, kind of acidic notes to it. We're not getting anything in that. But I mean, if this is port cast to me, like I would have to think this is refill. Like this doesn't come across as active port cast, matured, finished. Again, it's very spirit driven. The spectacular, again, look at the color. The color on this is very pale. This is very spirit driven. It is not an oak driven or a cask driven whiskey.
I don't know if you know or if Pam may know. I would not be surprised at all if these casks were treated before they built Ardbeg Spirit, whether they were rinsed or XTR'd or retoasted or something.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that fermenty, sour wininess that you get from some ports too. It's just fresh and fruity. So I think they've done something with casks, at the very least rinsed them.
We've talked about that a lot, Curt, because I mean, we've often found that like some companies are a lot better at using what we would call a wine cask than others. And it's whether it's rinsing, recharring, or in this case, you might even have got a mix of both, where this is like refill port casks as opposed to first fill. Again, we don't know, but the result is the same. It's a vessel to mature it in. It might have some things to give to the spirit, but it's not going to drown it out. And Cam, I think you might have, I don't know if you had some insight there for us too.
Yeah, that is accurate, Curt. So they are doing that. The thing I like about this too, it's still classically Ardbeg. It still has those characteristics. It's not just trying to put, some port jam inside of it. It does have that kind of classic oily structure that you would get from Ardbeg too, with just like hints of dried fruit, a little bit of like, But to me, I quite like this release. And the great thing about these Ardbeg Day releases is like, you can love them, you can hate them, but everybody's going to have an opinion about it. And that's the fun thing about it too.
And I think the sad thing is, and Cam, I know why they didn't do a committee release of it, but I think of all the releases in recent years, I kind of would have liked to have seen a higher proof version of this one.
It would have been beneficial for sure, for especially what they were doing.
But anyway, all right, Curt, speed rounds. Speed round and then a vote, which reminds me, while we're speed rounding, I have to edit the poll so that people get more than one choice. I think I get to do that. Do I get to copy it? Maybe not. Curt, let's go back through this, starting with 17. What are we getting here? Oh man.
It's so creamy and pretty. Lots of orange notes now. Creamsicle.
Yeah.
So
they've almost simulated.
Was it ice cream you said earlier, Andrew?
Yeah, Ardbeg ice cream.
There was, do you remember Single Malt TV? Used to do those short clips with Charlie McLean or whoever. There was a series of reviews with Mickey Heads in the warehouse. He cracked a bottle of Harry Nambesh at one point, and he goes, "This one is what people refer to as eating ice cream on the beach." And that's what this one reminds me. Very much so.
I think you got a mixed bowl of ice cream and maybe a bit of sherbet there too. The funny thing with the 17 is, I don't know how, like, it's almost as if they've found a way to put OBE in a bottle of new whiskey. Like, it's almost got that old bottle effect that, and maybe it's that low ABV, it is what's kind of catching me there, but this tastes like something that's been in bottle for like 10, 20 years, or it has the aroma of that.
That, right? You've got something that's 40% and spent 17 years, right? So a lot of oxidation here. I kind of think what that actually is.
It's lovely. But alas, I can't help but think 46%, maybe even low 50s.
Yeah, I hear you.
Would love to try it. But again, appreciate the homage. It's very well done. All right, Traigh Bhan, batch 6. Man, still so much fruitier, and it's also got this really, really, really nice, like clean, ashy smoke note.
I get a bit of grilled meat skin too on there.
Yeah, I can see that. Maybe a bit of Korean barbecue. Oh, man.
Great chewy fruits on the palate.
It's chewy, it's fruity. Again, the malt at that age.
That slightly rubbery note is still there. Hasn't really blown off.
The slightly which, sorry?
Rubbery note. I think I heard some reference to maybe salt, rubber, licorice, those kind of things, which you can kind of see.
Little bit of aged Gouda. All right, Y2K. Does anyone else like from that era ever feel like Y2K was a letdown? Like we were all told there was going to be like, I don't know, what's that movie where like they suspend the rules and you can like rob and kill people?
The Purge.
Like they were kind of selling it like it was going to be The Purge, and then like it was like womp womp. Like, not that I wanted bad things to happen, but like literally nothing went wrong. Anyway, just well, what are we? We're Gen Xers, Curt. Is that what we are?
I don't know.
We're kind of in between two generations, I think, where we are.
I'll steal a song quote for you for that one. Old enough to know I've done it, young enough to do it again.
Very tasty. Quite like that one. It's showing very well. All right. Heavy Vapours Committee Edition. Oh man.
It's footy, it's slightly cheesy, it's dense, it's oily.
It's really cheesy. It's cheesy. It smells like some guy in a hidden valley in Oaxaca making mezcal. There might be a raw chicken in the still. We're not sure.
I'm glad your sentence didn't end there. It smells like some guy in the bush in Mexico.
Like it's Pachuga, right? Is that the one where they put the raw chicken in there?
Yeah,
it's got a little bit of a Pachuga note to it.
I was in Mexico a few weeks ago and went to a really nice boutique tequila mezcal shop, and they had a sacrificial goat mezcal. I forget the name of it, but they actually sacrifice the goat and they distill it with the mezcal, and it had a crazy amount of just like beautiful smoked meat on the palate, and like it was. I didn't buy it, but it was really unique to be able to try.
I I don't know why that makes me feel bad for the goat. Like I'm glad I hope they ate it. But yeah, and I'm not a vegetarian, but for some reason, I don't know, I just instantly felt bad for the goat. Sacrificial. Maybe it's that word sacrifice, Cam. It's, you know,
So
Those were his words, not mine. So I mean, if it was a deliberate,
hopefully lost in translation. But I
oh,
mean, we joke about that. I mean, my buddy Bryce, who used to distill up in Fort McMurray, they've got a distillery here in Calgary and they're building one in Jasper. He made a mezcal akavit hybrid with a raw bison hung from the still or in the still. So, um, you know, goat, bison.
it
Anyway,
was the meat sweats, right?
that was Meat Sweats. That's what it was called, which was a great name. It was a hard sell though.
Because it
Fair
was
to say,
repulsive.
there was not a big market for people wanting to drink Meat Sweats. So, uh, Anamorphic. Yeah, Curt, I think I'm gonna continue to disagree with you. Like, just based on the nose, I really like that heavy Vapours. Vincent drank Meat Sweats. Attaboy, Vincent. The
This
palate,
one's kind of, sorry, Andrew.
the palate is more expressive than the nose was.
I think it's mellowed a little bit. Still
Mhm.
like that one.
All right,
Definitely.
Anthology. Anthology is a bit of a dark horse here for me. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I'm leaning Y2K 19. 17's good, but I think Anthology is kind of creeping in there a little bit on that 17.
I get a little bit of like lemon meringue pie on the nose of the Anthology.
Holiday Inn buffet melons,
Holiday Inn, huh? Like it.
or like Best Western. Bottom line is like melons of uncertain provenance is what I was getting at. A
Holy
little bit of
shit! If
that on
that's
the
not
palate too.
a WS name, it should be.
What's that, Curt?
That's not an SMWS name.
It
It really
should be an SMWS tasting or like a bottle name, melons of unknown provenance. Uh, and a great Ardbeg name too. The old Provenance release. All
I
right,
don't.
spectacular. Curt, are you going to be able to narrow this down to just three?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. Partly because I'm lazy, partly because I didn't want to take focus away from the tasting. We're going to do the poll twice here. So normally you get to vote for your first and second favorite, but because the poll was only set up once and I couldn't copy it and I don't want to type it out and just use time, you've got 2 minutes to vote for your favorite whiskey in the lineup. Once that's done, we're going to kill the poll and give you a chance to vote for your second favorite. It seems Evan got the job only a third done tonight because not only was there not a second favorite, but there was no cheeky third question. Now, Curt, knowing that Evan always thinks about and has these like wild third questions, what third question do you think you would have written for the poll if you were Evan?
It would have had to do with coming up with um, a clever play on the Ardbeg name. We've seen how they've used it multiple times. Every release,
Hog?
blog, whatever.
Yeah.
I won't mention a couple of the ones that have come up in the shop because they're very inappropriate. But I probably would have tried tweaking some of the ones we came up with, added a couple others, seen which one came out on top.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, another good one would be like come up with the name of next year's Ardbeg Day release.
Mhm.
So, Ardcore, we had a lot of things like that. I'm sure a lot of people could come up with something pretty clever for that. So for the next time we do an Ardbeg tasting, we'll have to like get Evan you know, preset to do that. Now, where are we at here on the poll? Most of you have voted, 7 of you have not. So again, you've got about roughly 1 minute to do that. So Curt, we're going to do this a little differently than we normally do. We normally do wait till the polls are done and then we share our favorite, second, third, so forth. Why don't we start with your favorites tonight? What was your favorite release of this entire range tonight, if you had to pick one?
Unquestionably, I would drink gallons of the 17.
Mm.
First time I've loved a 40% whiskey, and alone, everything about that works. And Jeff just nailed one of the ones we had in the shop, and I'm just going to leave it
Hard.
at. I'll leave
If you
the
had a very, what about if you had a very bacon forward Ardbeg? You could have Ardbeg. But is that
amazing.
is that too offside? I don't know. What if you went with a police theme? Again, probably too offside.
Now you're outside.
Yeah, I'm torn. That 17, despite despite the 40% ABV, like it's really, really showing well. Cam, same question for yourself. If you had to pick one of these as your favorite tonight, what would it be?
It's tough. I mean, 19's always been, when someone asks me like what my favorite expression is, it's always like 10-year-old and 19. So I'm a little bit biased towards that. I feel that like 17 though is like very interesting to be able to try. Andrew, to your point too, I mean, if it was 46, 47% ABV, I think it would be interesting. But yeah, I would probably say 17.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna be different just to be different tonight. I'm gonna go with Y2K. I don't know why, but I really like it. And I think my knock on the 17 is just as good as it is. I know it would be better with degrees as it went up in terms of strength, but a lot of respect for what it is. So I'm going to kill the poll for the first favorite there. There's still a bunch of stragglers, but the current favorite is Y2K, followed by a 3-way tie with 19 Heavy Vapours and 17. So there's that. So I'm going to clear that one. And I'm going to relaunch the poll so that you can vote for your second favorite this time around. And I want to give props to Kevin with his thin blue Ardbeg. I mean, again, the marketing, it writes itself. Second favorite whiskey in the lineup. So Cam, maybe I'll start with you this time since I went with Curt first. 17 was your favorite. What's your second favorite tonight?
I would say Y2K is a close second.
Okay. Cool. Curt?
Yeah, I have to go with the Y2K as well. I think right behind that would be the 19 and spectacular, sort of head to head. But the Y2K, yeah, I have a little bit of an ageist. I think we know that. I think you are too. It's just developed pretty. It's got a little bit more balance.
Okay. So Curt, you answered that. Your third favorite is the Traigh Bhan.
Tied with spectacular, I think. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's something fun about the spectacular tonight. It's just hitting the palate right with how big and jammy it is, I think. I think there's just a slight off note on that 19. Mm-hmm. Just not as enamored as there was with the previous 5. Still love it. A little bit off.
I'm going to be honest, I'm a total ageist on this. Y2K was my favorite. Traigh Bhan is my second. 17 is my third. My honorable mention, even though that's straying into fourth, though, is going to be Heavy Vapours. Like, I still really like that rough, raw, more mezcal-like one. So Cam, Curt's declared his third favorite. I declared third and fourth. What is your number 3?
I would say spectacular. I was impressed by it.
Wow. Okay. All right. Where is the poll at here? Wow, we got a better turnout on the second poll. So I'm going to end it on that. The results here I'll put up on screen. So for second favorite whiskey of the night, Traigh Bhan comes in second or first. The Y2K comes in second. And then Heavy Vapours and Anthology tied for third. So some interesting results there. Yeah, good lineup tonight. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention is we tuck aside some bottles from time to time in the shop. Sometimes it's a 6-pack of things. And we actually have a handful of Ardbegs that was trying to figure out what to do with, because I think we set aside more than we wanted or needed for future events. And so what we're going to do with that is send out a special email to just people who took part in tonight's tasting. We're going to give you a first crack at them. Curt, do you remember everything? Like, I think there's some Ardcore committee. There might be Heavy Vapours Committee as part of this. There's only a little over maybe 12 or 18 bottles total, but we're going to put that out as a special treat for those of you who took part in tonight's tasting, a chance to pick up a couple of bottles of Ardbeg that maybe you now regret you didn't buy a year or two ago. But we'll send an email out on that in the next day or so. Some funny comments in here. Damn your eyes, Andrew. 17 was my gateway, I believe, in the mid-90s at Kensington with a young Andrew Ferguson. In the mid-90s, that would have been with a different Andrew Ferguson, to be fair. That was Andy Thomas Henry Fergus, who worked there before I did. No relation, unless you go back probably 600 or 700 years. Bizarrely, my middle name is Thomas and my dad's name is Thomas Henry Ferguson. So there's a lesson in history there that the Fergusons and Fergus clan have been recycling names for approximately 700 or 800 years. But yeah, when I started there in 2003. Ardbeg 17 was still on the shelf. I think we probably had it until 05 or 06 before it disappeared. And it is kind of fun to see that back on there. Cam, I want to thank you for joining us tonight and adding some substance and detail to what otherwise would have been Curt and I just sort of, I don't want to say faking our way through it, but not far off from that either.
My pleasure. It was good to be a fact checker for tonight. And in light of everything too, I did manage to find a few cases of Anthology for you, Andrew. So it is now in your allocation. You'll see.
So I'll include that in the email for everybody as well too. We'll give you first crack at it for taking part in tonight's tasting before we release it to anybody else. But Cam, yeah, thank you very much for that. Everybody, thank you for taking part. Curt, thank you as always for co-hosting tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. Cam, I guess we're not far off from needing to have a chat about what the plans are for Ardbeg Day this year.
Yes, yeah, that's coming up here. So it'll be the Saturday, the first week of June. And yeah, we'll have to have a conversation pretty soon.
Sounds good. Well, look forward to it. Cam, thank you. Curt, thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Stay warm. It's going to be cold tonight. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.